So I will now close the solution. Typically just go clean everything and then close solution. And we'll return back to the lab project, which is part of the environment that we downloaded last week. And if you recall, we also rebuilt the library, the FLTK graphics library. And our last project that we tried to work on was Lab 2, which corresponds to the material presented in Chapter 12. So this is the project that I'm going to open right now in Visual Studio. And I jump to my location. And this is prepackaged solution, of course, but we can just copy and paste whatever we want inside there. And if you recall, the way we left it last week was that we tried to use two axis objects and a function named sign. And all of these objects took input parameters for to be initially populated with all sorts of things, and then we were running it, and we're displaying the results. So let's just build this. So to start, I will clean it and build it from scratch. I know there's some warnings related to the data types used inside the header files. So that's just something that we are not discuss right now, but ultimately with some warnings it builds okay, so I'll just run it now. So this generates this example of a sine curve, which is exactly one period, so going from 0 degrees through to 360 degrees. So if you recall, I made some adjustments to the original example that I said that apparently this sine curve is going to be taking place, and it takes a range of degrees to be used to compute sine, and it ranges from 0 to 360 degrees. The constructor of the sine function is expecting radians, so I added my own version of these two functions that convert degrees to radians and the radians to degrees in case if I need both. So this is the standard to conversion between those values. And then I said that starting from this specific point, it uses 1000 segments for the sake of accuracy of everything. So it's basically this curve is constructed out of 1000 segments. For instance, if we reduce the number of segments to, say, I don't know, maybe like 6, for example, so it will be sampling sine only 6 times. And you see that this time the version of the sine curve is like choppy, is like missing, missing all the details. So it's like basically using segments to construct the sine in this range, and with this only 6 segments, the accuracy of the curve is very low. So we can go back to go up to 10 segments. Then it will be Let me close this and run it again. So this one is more accurate, right? So the segments are still visible. There are still like a steps visible, and it's not very smooth, but it's getting closer. So this is just a number of segments used to construct the curve. This is how this function object behaves, and this is because the sign is only in range from -1 to 1, we would like to amplify it. So 20 is, I am assuming, amplifies it along the x-axis, and 50 amplifies it along the y-axis. So if I, for instance, to change from 50 to 100, and rebuild this application and add some accuracy to my segments, right, to make it look nicer, right? You see that the function was amplified 100 times. So basically, this is now going from 0 to 100 and goes all the way down to -100, and then continues going over there. So this is just like parameters that amplify the the appearance of the sign. Okay, so this is just like a bunch of. So I'd like to when I'm giving an example, I'd like to develop a feeling for its components that are used to describe the initial settings, and we so this is the whole thing is being summarized in these comments that come from the book. Well, anyway, so let's quickly examine the objects that we use in this lab so far. So we use axis twice, we name it x-axis and y-axis, and we construct function named sign. So let's just go and find these data types in the library and see how they are like internally organized and what they look like. All right, so as I mentioned, part of this project, Lab 2, under source, where I keep my own main file, which is this file right here. There's also a set of source files that came with the book. And there are two files, graph CPP and graph.h, the header file and the implementation file right here, which contain here, which actually implement these data types that we use in our sample. So let's take a look at them. So let's first find the axis. So let's start searching for the axis over here. Right. So, and you see that this is exactly the same way organized as we try to build from scratch. A little presentation earlier this morning is that axis is a structure which is the derived structure, and it derives itself from a shape. So basically the same idea that we used over here, that there is class shape and here's axis. So we were talking about circles and triangles. Here's the axis, which is deriving itself from a shape. And so here we have functions, member functions, which this axis defines. So there's draw lines, which is the basic drawing. There is move. We can move axis around the visible area of the screen. And there is a setting of the color. Right. So these are the three functions. Notice that these are only over here. Only declarations are visible, no implementation. So in C++, it's very common to separate implementation from the declaration. And if we look inside the implementation file, now I'm just guessing that if things were declared in the header file named graph.h, then I'm expecting to look for a very, very similar name graph.cpp, which is the implementation file. I will now move implementation file to another side of my screen over here. Right, so this is now, so I'd like to find, for example, definition of draw lines. Right, so I copy it from here, go to this file, press Control F, and say axis colon draw lines. So you see that this is implementation of this function. And so when we sort of like trying to draw the axis, of course, it is delegating this call to this. I mean, apparently this is. We still need to find out by looking at the shape whether this is a virtual function or not. So we may find out that. But basically, what this draw line does for the axis, it invokes the shape to draw the line. Right there, and then we have the lines over here. So the lines declared notches, so we draw them as well, and we also have the label, which is also stored with the shape, and so we draw that. So we're doing these these uh, these three components of the axis. So let's find shape and just compare shape with the axis definition. Let's see what our base class is capable of doing. I'm just to scroll up, expecting it to be somewhere close to the top of this implementation. There's some utility classes. Here's class name shape. And you see that there is a comment specifying that basically the class shape is dealing, like its responsibility is to take care of the color and style of lines and hold the sequence of lines which belong to the shape. These are constructors over here. So we can construct shape as an empty shape or as a set of points. Right here, I will skip over initializer list iterator for now. So here is draw lines. So draw lines is a virtual call. Right, so this is why when we use shapes, generally we store them somewhere. In reality, the draw lines is invoked for every specific type. So when there's time to draw the x-axis and y-axis and the sine curve, it's their specific line call will be invoked thanks to the functionality of virtual function calls, that at some point when reference to these objects is used, draw lines will be, print draw lines. Those are examples of virtual function calls for different types of objects. So this is how it's all organized. So therefore here we say that shape basically declares draw lines as virtual, so that when different shapes are gathered and we have a loop which tells every part of the form that you need to, let me close this, that you need to draw yourself, it will be invoking this draw lines for a specific class. Let's also take a look at the function. the function is a type of struct or a class that exists here in this file. So here it is. So the function takes pretty much the function derives itself from a shape, only uses its constructor to do all the work. So here somewhere I can look for function constructor that would look like this. And here's function constructor. So function constructor then will be what it does is basically checks for ranges of values and counters, and then basically uses two values to construct or to define location of 2 points, and adds one point and another point which is called oh, sorry, no, this is simply adding a sequence of points to the shape. That's all. And then the segments will be drawn from one point to another point. So basically, it just constructs a point with these coordinates to position them in 2D space, and this is all it does. And then when the function it's time to draw this sine curve. It's using the shapes function draw lines, which simply will draw all of the points, draw lines from point to point, which were added as part of this loop over here, part of the function, the sine curve constructor. So it's just like an overview of what is behind these objects. And this presents a terrific opportunity when you read the book, when you read the chapters, to look inside. Basically, just keep in view on your own computer, possibly, to keep in view everything. So basically, every step of the way that we have over here can be traced through the source code, and you can study how everything is organized. I think it's incredibly important skill for programmers to be able to read someone else's code. And this is intended to be fairly well commented and available for us to study as part of our, as part of the, processing our series of labs related to the graphical user interface. So for each chapter, I sort of like organize a lab. And for lab 12, which let me open it right now. Right, if we jump to the topics related to our current presentation, so we have this is it's since last week. Obviously, we're still working through this lab, and it just provides its own view of the same set of classes that actually do exist inside the textbook library of classes for the primitives, and you can see that this is not a complete set of classes, but the important thing is that there's a base class named shape, and things such as line or lines or a polygon, rectangle, and text, these classes derive themselves from the shape. And so at the runtime, what we get is that each single one of them will include shape as part of their actual object when text or rectangle or line is created by the program. When it's constructed, the shape, everything that exists inside the shape will be made part of the line and text and other graphical primitives. Just like we tried to demonstrate it here, that circle will have a shape and triangle will have a shape because we rely on this inheritance set of features, right? And so then we also have a window, and simple window that we use with the button also derives from the window. And then so let's actually check this set of classes inside the library. Why not? Right. So what we have is this is the subfolder that set of classes that came with the book. I just place everything in one folder, and here is the window definition. So you find I am expecting that this would be the window definition right here. Okay, so this is the window. So the window itself is derived from FL window, which is part of FLTK library. And so it has a couple of constructors over here. It has a destructor as well. And also it has essentially the uh, uh, member functions, right, which allows us to find out what is the width and the height of the window. We can resize the window to specify new dimensions, new width and height. The set the label, which sets the title bar for the window, and there are attach functions that you can see that take shapes as individual objects that can be attached to the window, so that they can participate in drawing of that window, and they can make themselves visible. So this is the organization of a window, and then there is also a simple window right here. I'm only looking at the header files over here, which typically contain declarations of structures and functions, and primarily all the declarations are present there. So we say here that the simple window is deriving itself from the window. So this is again on the diagram. This is how it looks like. The simple window deriving itself from the window. We say that simple window is a window based on this type of relationship. So it looks like arrow in on the diagram, but it just simply looks like a column over here. And of course, this is the base class and this is the derived class. And we have this wait for button that we use in our lab to wait for the next screen. It's using FLTK library wait call, and then as soon as the wait is over, it redraws everything. So this is the wait for button implementation, and it also using the button class, an instance of a button inside of this simple window, and positions it in the top right corner, as we can see it when it's running. So again, so everything can be placed and made visible when we continue working on this lab. And it comes to the when we scroll down to examples of the code, it's incredibly easy to copy and paste this and make it part of the lab, compile it, observe that the thing becomes visible. Of course, this is all easy part, but its intention is that we have an opportunity to actually look at the implementation of the graphics library that came with the book and examine how things relate to each other and what are the internal parts of these objects that make these drawing primitives visible when we run the application.